Okay. I have to tell you the good news. This is actually a pilot for launching a series on self-improvement, which we are going to launch not this Thursday, but Thursday after this. And John used to run the series, and he's going to come to kind of set the bar as high as possible. And we will figure out how to make the most of it. I want it to be highly interactive. I want people to be able to share the books that they like and do that. So that's the plan. So I'm going to start with Mike A, followed by Goran. Mike, go right ahead.
Yeah, so the book that I chose is called The War of Art. I kind of like the play on words as opposed to The Art of War. It's by Stephen Pressfield. And what I like most about the book is very, very practical. If anybody's read it before, it's short. I think it's, I'll let you know right now, it's about 160 pages. And it's cut in very short chapters. And each one has a title that's applicable to not just an artist, but really anybody who's trying to produce something and is running into what he calls resistance. A great deal of the book is about that concept of what creates the barrier between you and getting your work done. If you're an artist and you're trying to produce something and you get up in the morning, there seems to be almost like an invisible force field between you and the table or you and the chair. And it's a great discussion about the first step being, get your tail in the chair and start writing. And it's also a good, you get a nice tailwind about producing something, getting it out the door before you've produced a Picasso. He's very clear about that you don't necessarily need everything to be in order before you put it out for criticism or for publication. And other parts of the book talk about other disciplines besides just writing. And I think you can apply this to music. You can apply it almost anywhere where your creative process seems to be running up against a brick wall. I know in my own life, it happens constantly that I magically find these excuses that just suddenly appear between me and whatever it is that I want to do. And if I were looking for them beforehand, I wouldn't find them. But the second it is that I have something to do, they magically appear like gremlins, and I have to get myself through them. So the book is all about that. And something also I like in the middle of the chapter, it's actually on page 69 in the middle of the book, he says that we are basically all pros already. And that reminded me of the book Sparks of Genius by Bernstein, who actually presented here, and Dr. Codalesa, who did all the meetups here on polymathy, where she said we're all polymaths to some extent, that it runs on a range. And Pressfield is pretty clear in the book that you also are all fit the category of artist or creator. You just need to be face to face with the concept of resistance. He defines it very well, and I'll finish with this. He describes resistance as being such a militant fighter that if you reduce it down to a single cell, and I'm paraphrasing his words, that single cell of resistance will still continue to attack you. So it is just a fascinating look at those initial steps, getting in the chair, getting the work done, and getting it out before you overanalyze what it is that you produced. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Well, Goran, I'm sorry, but there is this beautiful, I can't pass this up. Sophie and Colin want to talk about the art of war. Let's go to from War of Art to Art of War. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to speak on a short section in it concerning essentially it's talking about the way that you face an adversary. And I think one of the best ways to extend Art of War is not simply as like explicitly what it's covering, but as a broader philosophy book on how to interact with other human beings. And it's not, it's a little wider than just when you're fighting with them, but just interactions in general, whether they're to your benefit, mutual benefit, whatever. Yeah, and so one of the biggest examples of why I believe that is the section on how to face an enemy on the best in the best possible way, is to attack, is to avoid that sort of epic battle, the one that's like this huge clash of titans, and go for take your forces to hit where you can cause the most effect. That's sort of
Colin, let me
idea.
just interrupt. I'm going to request Joe to handle moderating. I need to just step away for a couple of minutes. All right, Joe?
Okay. Sure, no problem.
All right, and you can just call on people in sequence, and they're going to just talk about the books in 2 to 5 minutes, and we'll keep going. You can call on anybody you want. Next up is Goran, but after that you can choose.
Okay, sounds great.
Sure.
So, go ahead, Colin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so that was something I think has really allowed me to navigate life much more effectively, is this idea of yeah, you could have this spectacular show of force, this really emphatic display of superiority in something or other, and that could potentially yield some advantage. But when you're looking at how to accomplish your next goal, it's better than it's not the path of least resistance. It's though I guess technically, but it's more the path of least opposition to get to the goals that you need to achieve. And that's really helped me prioritize and push towards things that have been a lot more successful than if I'd done something, if I'd gone for this big overarching goal that looks like a big win. That I think it helps a lot with those steps to it, and ultimately definitely provides you with a lot more benefit.
Thank you for that, Colin. So next up we have Goran.
Give me a few more minutes. I'll go just a little later.
Sure, no problem. How about next up, Jeff? Would you like to? Are you ready for to speak about your favorite book?
Sure, just a second.
Sure. And if anybody would like to go next, oh, actually, Addie, if you would like to go first, go right ahead.
Yes, I have been wanting to talk about this mystery book. I have asked for Shikan's permission that I would like to talk about a book that I would like to not, reveal the name of the author. But this book has really influenced me tremendously. It is like none that I have ever seen. The reason why this book is so personal is that this book is written by a professor from my alma mater from long before I went to the school, and it was his biography. And he was like a mentor to me, because even though he like didn't really mentor me, but from his book that I read, I feel like that is the definition of what intelligence is. Because in his book, he not only just writes about his biography, but he has like knowledge about a lot of stuff. Like he put a lot of stuff in there that is like beyond his field as well. For example, he would put like Greek mythology, he's familiar with everything, a lot of languages. And this book is just like, it really amazed me, it really moved me, and I felt like I really got to know him. And I have learned a lot from this book. And his book is like a model for me. of a person I would like to become.
Thank you for sharing, Yadi. I mean, that's one of the most important things, is that it's something where we can keep coming back to the book, and it keeps coming, but it's something to, is kind of timeless, and it really changes our lives. Next up, I'm actually going to call on Judy first. Jeff, is that okay? Since you put typed exclamation point. In the chat.
Absolutely. Okay, I read this book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections,
Mhm.
in a time when I was about 23 and I was aimless. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And it changed me completely to this day. It gave me purpose. It gave me meaning. I understood my dreams. I went into therapy. I studied to become a career counselor in Myers-Briggs and career education and adult education by asking questions. It helped me with my individuation process in different cycles of my life. It just made me understand my soul, my psyche, my mind, and others. So it's just been a wonderful experience, and I keep coming to it year after year, decade after decade. It just inspired me to write also journals. Carl Jung wrote the Black Books. I don't know if you have mentioned it, but I just recently took a course on the Black Books, and it's like repetition. I repeat it. I'm not saying that I'm like him, but I wrote so much, like he wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and I have been writing and writing and writing, and I've been inspired to write about my insights and my meanings and purposes and analysis and patterns and all these things that I read when I was about 23 years old. And I've been doing it for like 5 decades, teaching and training myself to become a better person. And it's been just fascinating, the thrill that I get every time I take a course on Carl Jung or anything related to his dreams, memories, and reflections. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, we've done a whole series
Mhm.
here on Carl Jung, and
Mhm.
as you go deeper into him, you kind of realize that you really can start to see how the depth of his work. And any book that would actually inspire you to look deeper into that is a worthwhile book indeed. I'm going to
Mhm.
actually ask everyone maybe if they wouldn't mind putting their book in the chat, the name of the book in the chat once they speak. That might make it easier for everybody to keep track of the books.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say one more thing. I don't know how you can see it from here, but it's like, I've really read it. You can see how used it is. So it's a book
Yes.
that it's a book that I keep going back to constantly, and I'll put it in the chat, the name.
Thank you for that, and thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Mhm.
So next up, we'll go with Jeff.
Okay, so mine is a book that I was recommended to me, and just a few days ago, and I've been going through it. I view quotes as poetry, and this book is called The Inspirational Atheist. And I was surprised. I'd never heard of the book, and all I want to do is read in the 3 minutes I'll take here, maybe 20 quotes. So, facing it, always facing it. That's the way to get through. Face it. Joseph Conrad, Typhoon. Humility is the mother of giants. One sees great things from the valley, only small things from the peak. G.K. Chesterton. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Chinese proverb. Don't undertake a project unless it is manifestly unimportant and nearly impossible. Edward Land, inventor of the Polaroid camera. Do those things that incline you towards the big questions and avoid the things that would reduce you and make you trivial. George Saunders. Quit now, you'll never make it. If you disregard this advice, you'll be halfway there. David Zucker. What we bear is not so important as how we bear it, a Stoic maxim. First answers are usually knee-jerk. Second answers tend to be cute. Third answers to the same question sometimes tell the truth. Stuart Brand. It is almost impossible to overestimate the unimportance of most things. John Logue. Let's see. We have to stop consuming our culture. We have to create culture. Terence McKenna. The best thing one can do when it is raining is to let it rain. Henry Wadsworth. The chief danger in life is that you may take too many precautions. Alfred Adler. Be less curious about people and more curious about ideas. The man who can't visualize a horse galloping on a tomato is an idiot. Andre Breton. Much of good science, and perhaps all of great science, has its roots in fantasy. E.O. Wilson. There is an incessant influx of novelty into the world, and yet we tolerate incredible dullness. Henry David Thoreau. If you can't see anything beautiful about yourself, get a better mirror. Shane Kazakhstan. If you retain nothing else, always remember the most important rule of beauty, which is, who cares? Tina Fey. I contend we are both atheists. I just believe in one fewer God than you do. When you understand why you dismiss all the other possible gods, you will understand why I dismiss yours. Stephen F. Roberts. And then I'll offer just one more here. Let's see. When confronted with anyone who holds my lack of religious faith in such contempt, I say, it's the way God made me. Ricky Gervais. So this book has many great, wonderful quotes in it. It's called The Inspirational Atheist, and it's organized by a number of different headings. And I'm very impressed with it so far. I'm not even all the way through it, but there's a little sample.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's comments on those quotes. So folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat. I wasn't keeping track of those of you that have said that they were going to, Kevin, that they were going to share a book. For everyone that has come in late, we're actually just sharing the book that has inspired us the most as part of the rekindling of self-improvement. It'll be on Thursdays this time. It used to be Self-Improvement Fridays, and it was led by one of our speakers here, John, who will be leading a discussion next week. So just type exclamation point in the chat to let us know what book has inspired you the most in your life. And if you could just share a little bit about that book, that would be wonderful. So next up, we have Kevin.
Thank you, Joe. My sharing is about 700 years ago in Chinese. From a parent to the school, teach the first kind, very easy. This total about 7 Chinese characters. I'm going to read the translation about 3 to 6 chapter. The first one. Do you want to read Chinese too?
Yes, go ahead. Absolutely.
人之初，性本善，性相近，习相远. The total are 12 characters. So when people are born, their nature is good. Their dispositions are similar to each other, but experience makes them different from each other. Chapter 3. 昔孟母，择邻处，子不学，断机书. We know the Confucius, and another next Confucius is called Mencius. So that's his mom how teaching him when he was a child. In antiquity, Mother Men selected where to live based on their neighbors. When her son didn't study, he broke the shutter of her room. And another chapter 7. 玉不琢，不成器，人不学，不知义. Unpolished jade cannot become a tool. An unlettered man cannot know righteousness. Chapter 10. It's called 融四岁，能绕梨，低于长，易些知. Jung based one boy at age called Kong Rong, at the age of 4, could offer his brother pears to share, basically sharing. To behave like a young brother towards elder ones is the first thing to know. It shows respect. Last chapter, I'm going to on 42. It's about Rachel kind. 长幼序，幼与朋，君则敬，诚则忠. A junior is subordinate. Friends are equal. A monarch is polite. A minister loyal. It's about kingdom and minister relationship. What I'm sharing here is because I still have some practical benefit for modern society still, I would say. Especially the first chapter, they say the human nature about it is bad or good initially. They here say human nature is good initially. Because our experience is different, we change our original toddler thought. Thank you. You mute, Joe.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kevin. So next up, Goran, are you actually ready to share?
Sure.
Sure.
I read many books, but the first one I accidentally picked up back in former Yugoslavia. I was trying to learn English better, so I went to a bookstore and just went to the bookshelf where the English books are, and I just picked one fairly randomly, but that kind of changed my life. It was Wayne Dyer, Your Erroneous Zones. A bunch of stuff in there, but like one quote that really made me think was this one. And you, dear reader, have you really lived 10,000 days, or have you lived one day 10,000 times? I was like, wow, that's a good question. What does it mean to live a good life? You know, meaningful life, full life, rich life, you know, life truly worth living. So we talk about self-improvement, and we can improve all kinds of different things about ourselves. One thing I can improve about myself is self-knowing, is a wisdom about myself that makes one aspect of self-improvement, self-discovery. So to me, that was the essence of that quote. Like, okay, I need to now question and discover first, what is the life truly worth living? and then I can make an effort to try to achieve it, right? Because otherwise I'm like a guy who's lost in the woods and just keeps running in one direction without trying to figure out which direction to run. It doesn't make much sense to improve myself if I don't know if that particular area of improvement is going to contribute to my life or not. You know, I can become a better hitman or a better bully or something. That wouldn't really improve anybody's life. But if I just sit and see, okay, what is a good life? You know, what kind of life do I want to live? Once I answer that question, then I can work towards that goal. So that's what I got from that book. It propelled me on that journey of questioning myself, my life. What am I supposed to do? So for that, I thank Wayne Dyer for planting that seed in me.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. You know, I appreciate that a great deal. You know, that's something that Stoicism has provided me. They asked the same question, you know, what makes a good life? So then you start to go through the process of contemplation of what is really meaningful. And that was a beautiful quote that captured, you know, have you lived? There you are. Hi, Shrikant. Welcome back.
You missed the quote from Wayne Dyer.
Yes.
And you, dear reader, have you really lived 10,000 days? Or have you lived one day 10,000 times?
Beautiful. Wonderful. All right. So how many people have finished so far?
So far about
So it is Mike, then Colin and Goran.
Colin, yes, and then we also had Addie that went,
Okay.
as well as Jeff.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Let's see who
And
is
Judy also went as well.
Okay, so wonderful. How about doing the reading by Steve Holman? Steve, go ahead. Give me just a second here. Just mute. Folks, what we're going to do immediately after we are done, keep track of all the ideas that you are finding particularly useful. So after everybody is done, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. What are the top 3 ideas that you heard today that you think will be useful for you to make your life better? Okay, so that's going to be the question. And then we will take all the ideas and then we'll start discussing them. That's the plan. All right. Let's go with Steve.
Thank you. This book I came upon my first year in college, and it's The Prophet. Most of you have probably heard of it, Khalil Gibran. And it's a very broad philosophical book. He talks about subjects such as having children, giving, working, buying and selling, crime and punishment, freedom, reason and passion, pain, self-knowledge, friendship, time. I thought in honor of the day, I would read his passage on love. Then the man said, "Speak to us of love." And he raised his head and looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, "When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep. And when his wings enfold you, yield to him. Though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you, and when he speaks to you, believe in him. Though his voice may shatter your dreams, as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderness and branches, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, he gathers unto you. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husks. He grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for God's sacred feast. All these things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world where you shall laugh, but not all of your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. All right. Let's see. Let's go with Kevin next. Folks, if you have
Kevin
not...
already actually.
Kevin already went.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that.
Very good. No problem. Let's see. Who else? Give me just a second here. Brian. Did Brian go? Brian Allenby?
No, but I can now.
Go for it.
Okay, I have read a vast number of self-help books throughout my life. It's very difficult just to choose one. So rather than choose something specific, I chose something which guided the kind of life I tried to live. And it's self-help in that it talks about various things which are important, although nothing specific, nothing like how to read, how to do speed reading, or how to do other things like that. It's a very general book. It's called Your Life is in Your Hands, and is subtitled The Path to Lasting Health and Happiness. It's by a guy called Krishan Chopra. And it starts, and it covers a lot of the book, covers managing stress. He talks about it as an epidemic. And then he talks about other ways to improve your lifestyle, to avoid heart disease, cancer, that kind of thing. He talks a lot about diet. And I think it's the learning I got from this led me to Ayurvedic diet, which has been a great help in my life. So it's interesting following what he said there. He talks a lot about meditation and prayer as well. And a vast proportion of the book is talking about adding a spiritual dimension to your life. It's covers mainly the sort of the Vedic way of life. That's what it's based around. And it's, so rather than anything specific, it was a guide to my life. I found it very interesting. I bought it about 30 years ago, and I've read it several times since. And I still occasionally use it to refer to certain things like I maybe need a refresher on. So it's been a very useful and very, very valuable book for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Folks, if you could put the books that you've talked about in the chat so other people can look them up. All right, folks. So who else would like to speak? Andrew, Addie, you have already spoken. So let me give a chance for everybody else, anybody else who has not spoken, and then we are going to look at the patterns that come from that. So we're going to start with Allison. Allison.
Okay, so my voice is kind of strained, so I'm drinking tea, trying to bring my voice back. The book that I think it's my absolute all-time favorite book is Crime and Punishment. And so this is kind of a spoiler alert, but at the very beginning of it, the main character murders a pawnbroker. He's a student, he's very poor, he's frustrated, and the pawnbroker's pretty mean. And So that's the very beginning. And then the rest of the book, he's wrestling with what he did. And it really torments him in many, many ways. And it sort of comes, it's all about that torment. So I read the book. I was 24 years old. I was a dancer in New York. I had a basement apartment in Queens, and my landlord refused to heat the apartment. And no matter how much I begged, he wouldn't fix it, and I wouldn't. So I pretty much froze the entire winter. And during that winter, and I was, too young and naive to have any idea about what tenant landlord places to report him to, and I didn't have any money to go anywhere. And so during that winter, I came across that book, and it really, really spoke to me. And I mean, I wasn't going to attack my landlord or anything, but it felt like vindication as I read this book. But as I kept reading, and then I got to, the next 400 pages, all about what it did to him. What I really realized was that when somebody does something to you, no matter whatever it is, you have a choice in how you respond to that. And that if you allow it to destroy you, that punishment, in a sense, is far worse than whatever the person did to you. And so you really become your own worst enemy. And I feel like, I've heard people say that you have to forgive somebody to move on with your life. And I always feel like I don't think you have to necessarily forgive, because I think some things are unforgivable, but you need to accept. And I think forgiveness and acceptance, they're really like they're cousins, but they're not really the same. But ultimately, it's very important to kind of accept what was done and then let go of it in a way, and then move on. And I feel like it's really helped me a lot. I mean, I was only 24 when I read it, but it really, really spoke to me. And I think throughout my life, I've been able to do that. And I've watched people who can't. And so I just came back very late last night from a vacation in the Dominican Republic, which was fabulous. And there was a woman at my hotel who had cancer, and she had lost all of her hair. She was in her 30s, very, very young. But what was just amazing was, and all my friends were talking about that, her spirit, you looked at her, we didn't no idea what kind of cancer, whether or not she'd survive or not. But rather than sitting at home being miserable that her life is in jeopardy, she got on a plane, went to a beautiful island, and had a wonderful vacation. And that really was kind of like the spirit of what Crime and Punishment is, that it's not about what you're handed in life, it's about what you choose to do with what you're handed. So that's what I got out of that book.
Wonderful. It looks like Addie really wants to talk about some book. Addie, please keep it short. Go ahead.
Okay. So the book, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, I don't know if anybody here have read this book. It's very inspirational. It is non-fiction. It is a fiction book, but it's very philosophical. That is written in a way that anybody, when they read it, their perspective will change. And you can read some of the quotes, but the reason why I like it because it's based on the Christian's ideas about hope. And I really like it because in this book, the story is that this woman with children, his husband died, and she was in a very difficult situation. She was poor and doesn't have money, always run into a situation. But God's always show His way of loving us through a lot of the stuff that this, because like in this book, this woman experienced a disappointment, and then she found hope again, and disappointment and hope again. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it in a better way. But when you read it, you will be really, really moved by this book. And I can read one of the quotes, maybe just one. There is no such thing as a hopeless situation. Every single circumstances of your life can change. Everything in this book is about is like this. Have all the very hopeful, inspirational messages. And anybody who's like depressed or anything with this book, their life will be changed completely. I promise you. And another book that is similar to this is called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Let's
I
do
don't know
one thing.
if you're,
Look, Adi, see all of these books, like for example, Alchemist is a very deep book, and there is a
Yeah.
lot. So let's just put one book today.
yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, I'll chill out.
Thank you. So let's now talk about connection. Joe, did you get a chance to talk about your book? Or okay.
No, I didn't. But
Okay.
I mean, I can talk about it.
Let's do one thing. Let's
Sure.
let's get other, because we have talked a lot about
Yeah,
Stoicism,
absolutely.
because I want to kind of increase the range of topics that we are discussing.
Okay.
So folks, the next thing now is I'm going to ask all of you just one question. What are the top three? You can talk about 1, 2, or 3, but not more than 3. Of all the ideas that you have heard, what do you think are, which of these ideas you think you found useful, that you think will be useful in your life? So you can go ahead and type exclamation mark, and then we're going to collect all the things that people say have been useful, and then we're going to be discussing all of them together. Okay, we may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll try to get to many of them. Even if somebody mentions an idea, and if you found it useful, go ahead and put it on the table. So more ideas that get more votes will be discussed first. Okay, and we'll try to see the pattern that emerges. Okay, so this is, we're going to start with Joe, and then hopefully many of you will share what ideas you found useful. Joe.
So 3 of the ideas that kind of stuck out to me was, Garan's was a very important one. What actually makes for a meaningful life?
What is the
And
meaningful
Wayne,
life? Mhm.
yes, and so that Wayne Dyer's book answered that for him. Judy's book as well, this journey to self-knowledge, to knowing oneself, with Carl Jung, and going in deep to understand herself and what it inspired. So self-knowledge is overall. And then Allison really beautifully, absolutely captured the understanding of forgiveness and acceptance much better than I could have. So that's the only thing I was really going to talk about anyway. So that was quite fitting. Those are the three things that that stuck out to me initially.
Wonderful. Thank you. So what is meaningful life? How do you pursue self-knowledge? And what is the value of forgiveness and acceptance? Excellent. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to talk about 3 ideas, to name 3 ideas. It could be just one, that's fine. Anything that stood out. I mean, clearly for me, I missed a bunch of the presentations, but Allison's idea really stood out for me, because what happens is that all of these kind of negative things really eat at you. So the idea of letting go in order to move forward, I thought it was really good, really amazing. All right, folks, so go ahead and please type an exclamation mark. I hope you heard a lot of ideas, at least one idea that you found useful. Mike A, followed by Steve. Mike.
Yeah, I kind of connected Allison and Goran's presentations with, so Wayne Dyer reminded me of the book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And when Allison was talking about crime and punishment, and I kind of stuck them together, and I'm calling it just the power of personal choice, like how you can interpret something, that you have an ability to distinguish between how you're looking at something. Then Jeff, when he was reading the quotations, I'll just call it the power of quotations, because I find them very powerful if you break them down and think about them. And then the book that I discussed, The War of Art, and then The Art of War, just kind of made me think of execution and tactical awareness, like doing something concrete. So I don't know how you want to label that as an idea, but just maybe direct application or execution.
Wonderful. So I'll put it as 3 things. One is I'll use the title, Wayne Dyer's Change Your Thought, Change Your Life. The idea that if you change your thought, you change your life, because that's great application, a great way of capturing what Allison says, but in a more general way. The next one is kind of power of quotations. It is really interesting that these little things which get into your head and that really kind of explode in your head and will allow you to see a lot of connections that you did not see before. And the last one is the value of actually applying something, making something concrete. So you bring whatever ideas that you have, whatever dreams that you have into reality. Next up is Steve. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to share what you got from it, and then we'll have a discussion. Steve, what did you get?
Yeah, the three main points that I wrote down. Number one, go within yourself for self-understanding, know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, don't seek love, let love find you. And three, you can't control the external environment, but you can control your reaction to the environment. So you always have a choice.
Wonderful. Excellent. External and internal. Joe is going to talk about this also. So next up is folks, go ahead and share what else you got. Otherwise, we'll start talking about the ideas that we have on the table so far. So let us do that. We're going to start with okay. Joe, go ahead.
Would it be all right if I brought up a couple of the ideas that maybe from past?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I want to keep it. I want to just keep it here.
Okay.
I want people to put things on the table, fresh new things that have come up. And so it'll keep on enriching the discussion that we have. Judy, what ideas that did you get from everything that was said?
Okay, the first one is that there's a lot of gratification and satisfaction from learning.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is that the discovery of new ideas is worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is that the inner life is enriched by reading.
Wonderful. Thank you. Excellent. So I'm going to bring all of these together. So let me just list all of them, and then we'll start talking about them. I'm going to see if there is a structure to it. So we have talked about self-knowledge. We've talked about meaningful life. We've talked about forgiveness and acceptance, changing your thoughts to change your life. We talked about the power of actually doing something, letting love find you, focus on internal, what you can control, versus external, and the satisfaction of learning. So let's start. So the theme here is we are talking about self-improvement. Okay, so I'm going to choose things that are more focused on self-improvement and then kind of keep going out, but so many things are satisfy that requirement. So let me just start where we can. So change your thought, change your life. Okay, there are many things that lead to that, not focusing on the external, but focusing on your own evaluation. If somebody wrongs you, being able to kind of forgive, accept, and move on. So what is the role of how can you improve your life by just changing your perspective internally? What do you think about that? You can talk about all of these various aspects of it, that Mike brought up, that Allison brought up, that Steve brought up. What do you think about how you can improve yourself by just changing how you think? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share. We'll start with Joe.
I think changing your thoughts are, is something that is fundamental to your own personal well-being. Specifically, if you think about even the type of language that you use when you're describing an event, it actually allows you to speak objectively about a particular situation, as opposed to letting your emotions dictate. I'm getting a little feedback, but as opposed to letting your emotions dictate your reactions to things. And I think that that's really kind of what we're talking about with maybe also with Allison's situation in particular, not only not getting emotional about it and looking at things objectively, but taking even a step further where she was looking at it from the other person's perspective. And then understanding what the reaction does to her, but also looking at what the other person, how they're misguided, and what they must feel like as well. I think that that's kind of crucial to kind of forgiving someone. So I think that there's something that I've worked on personally is, again, just using the types of words that I use when I'm just describing a situation. I try not to assess things as good or bad, and look at them for what they are in and of themselves. And I think that really, it helps. It helps. It's not, it's not a cure-all, but it helps.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Steve, followed by Goran. Steve.
Yeah, to Joe's remark, to be objective and give a police report of, just the facts. These are the facts of the situation without being overly reactive. And then getting back to self-care and self-love to move into a rich interior life rather than trying to find things outside of yourself and being frustrated that you can't find these things in the external world, to go within and be your own best friend, love yourself, be a friend to yourself. I think that leads to great self-improvement.
Thank you. Next up is Goran. Goran, go ahead.
Change your thoughts, change your life. We can probably expand the word thoughts into the whole field of inner understanding of the world. I think lots of trouble comes from illusions, from not really knowing accurately what's really going on with me, with others, and so on. Like if I'm a doctor treating somebody and I think they have bronchitis, treating bronchitis, but they actually have cancer, I'm not going to be helpful. I have to know actually what's really going on in order to be able to do the right thing. My personal example, I was in this job, I got some assignment that was really stressing me out, and it was really bad life. And I was thinking, oh, I need to do this, I need that, I need to get a different assignment, I need to do a better job. Until it finally dawned on me, I can just quit the damn job and find a better one. Once I changed my thought about it, I quit my job, found another one quickly, which was a lot better. I was a lot happier. Big change in my life, just by changing my thinking. Mm-hmm. My illusion was that I have to kind of improve myself in this particular job. Once I understood the deeper wisdom of it, no, actually, you don't have to stay in this job. Then it happened, right? So this is the whole thing about self-discovery. Where are my delusions? Where are my obstacles? Where are my blind spots? Change my thought, change my blind spots, new doors open. I think that's the most powerful way of changing one's life, like transformational one, to change the perspective, change the understanding, rather than just a little you know, gradual little steps of improvement in maybe a wrong direction. Like me putting more effort in this stupid job wouldn't help my life a lot. But the deep insight that this is a wrong job transformed my life much greater way.
Beautiful. Steve, you would like to add something?
Yes, similar to what Graham's saying, the famous Wayne Dyer quote, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Wonderful. Thank you. The most powerful version of this that I'm experiencing now is encountering Bhagavad Gita. And its idea is that, you know, you have this inner core. You have your Atma, which is connected to Brahma, so which is the existence. So if you're focused on the core of your being and focused on existence itself, it just gives you a perspective where all these things kind of fall away. The importance, it's not that there are bad things out there or external things out there. It's just that they occupy certain attention in your life. If once you're like the way in which like Naneshwar, who is the commentator I'm reading on Gita, he talks about like once you're focused on your core, what that does is that there is so much joy there and so much peace there that everything else kind of melts away. It's not that you're saying, no, 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 I'm fighting this. It's just that your perspective completely changes. And that core is untouchable by anything else because it's just yours. So it's you and the universe, you and God, if you want. I'm not religious, but it's an experience with the universe in the core of you and the universe. And once you look at things from that perspective, things look very, very different. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I think that this is proven out, I mean, through science essentially as well, with, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy in general as well. Just it's reframing the situation to make it the best you possibly can. And so job is a perfect example. It's how we essentially, you know, we're changing our thoughts that, you know, do I really want to do this? Is this something that I, you know, is this, instead of thinking about it from your perspective, thinking about it as what can I do to make a situation a little bit better? You know, and kind of you're changing your thoughts and you're taking it from not only you're looking internally, but it's allowing you to go external. And that's a really important point, because when you start to look internally, you could say to yourself, well, then how do I service my coworkers? How do I not let them down? You know, what can I do to be there for them? And that's where you're trying to take the situation where you were looking at it as a negative, that, you know, why am I in this job? Do I really want to do this? Is this about me? And then you start making it about other people, the people around you, which is bigger than yourself. So then you try and improve on that job, as opposed to staying stuck in yourself saying, what is this world giving to me? How do I make this world better for other people? And once you can make that leap, that reframing, and change your thought process for that, then that's truly liberating. That is truly liberating, because then externals really don't necessarily matter as much, because it's about you getting outside yourself, not going looking inward. And I think that that's where you're changing your thoughts. You not only change your position, but you change the people around you. And you can see it in people that have a certain, eagerness or joy about them. So.
Joe, I have to tell you about one idea. It's called dichotomy of control, of being focused on just, you know, what is it that you can control?
Did you come up with it this week?
Yes. We've done about 30 meetups on this, because that's really what it is. Because it's like, once you realize that, you accept things that you can't change, and you focus like a laser beam on things that you can change. And you're very prudent about saying, what is it that I can't change, and what is it that I can change? And go with that. It's really, really powerful. It's very interesting that we've done actually many meetups on so many of these different aspects. And one of the things I'm hoping to do in this self-improvement series is to highlight all this rich context that our meetups, 52 Living Ideas have done. And many of us here have lived through those things. So it will be really interesting bringing all those ideas in and seeing the connections between that. Now, talking of which, Individuation and Carl Jung, we have done about 50 meetups on Carl Jung, and we did an entire series on individuation, where some of the really amazing Jungian psychologists and psychoanalysts came and spoke in panels on each aspect of these ideas. So you can go to the YouTube channel for 52 Living Ideas, and you will find and search. There is a playlist for Jung. You'll find all of those things. So let's talk about that. But before that, wait a minute. There is Mike and Allison. Mike.
Yeah, so to Joe's point about when you're changing your thoughts, how it affects the external world. Because if your mood changes and you just go and you buy a cup of coffee from somebody and you're in a good mood, I'm a big believer in the tipping point, that if you take somebody's mood and you change it just incrementally, just a tad, right? And then the next person that comes in line and interacts with that person, there's a big difference than if I come to that person for my cup of coffee and I'm in a bad mood and I'm grouchy and I just shout the order out. What happens to that tipping point? It's not a major one, but it's a little one. And the next person that comes in line, that can kind of expand out. So it's sort of a way of putting karma out in the world, but not with your thoughts or prayers. It's manifesting in those tiny changes of interaction.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Allison.
One thing about the changing your thoughts, one thing I've said to my students for years is I said, in every day, no matter how difficult it is, there's a sunset and there's a sunrise. So if you, even when everything seems absolutely horrible, go outside, look at the sunset, notice the beauty of it. And then my other thought was, when I was thinking about Dostoevsky and thinking about what I wanted to say about it, it suddenly dawned on me, well, wait a second, Dostoevsky was a Stoic. Who knew?
Wonderful. Folks, we're doing an entire series on Dostoevsky. Every other Sunday, we're going through his book called The Possessed or Demons. It's a wonderful book. So if you'd like to look at Dostoevsky has one of the most amazing portraits of what goes on inside a human mind. Many of them are not really amazing characters, but the depth with which he portrays that, and the insight with which he understands all the motivations and how they actually work, it's just mind-boggling. Next up, we're going to talk about the topic of self-knowledge, of know thyself. We're going to start with Carl Jung, Carl Jung's concept of individuation. I'm going to introduce it thus. There is a big difference between the self, in Carl Jung's thought, there is a big difference between the self and the ego. The same is true with the Indian philosophy of that of Atma, which is like the core of your being, and your ahamkar, which is like your ego. And most people identify themselves with their ego. Ego is one which is proud of everything that you've done, everything that you know, whereas the self is the core of you and the whole of you. So it is very easy to kind of focus on your ego as yourself. And Carl Jung talks about the power of individuation, where you are open to discovering your own self. So any thoughts about Carl Jung and individuation, or about the journey of self-knowledge? Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. I tried earlier and had connection issue, and I had to figure out how to come back. But yes, for that one, what if you find that like your inner self, like your core self, has like a totally different understanding or life plan for you or of the world than the other self? But we kind of need both, right? So it's almost like we have two selves in a way, if we spend time with both of them, like the ego self and the core self. And what if the core self wants something that the ego self doesn't feel good about? Like, what if they're in conflict? What do you do?
Wonderful, excellent question. We will continue with comments at a high level on this, and if anybody wants to deal with any of the questions that are put on the table, you're welcome to do that. Next up is going to be Joe, Addie, and Goran. Joe.
Yeah, I think that this actually has a lot to do with also our previous question and changing our thoughts, because you have to look inward at the ego, right? And what is it that's really, truly impacting the way you're thinking about the world? And it's this idea, what is, it's your pride. And why are you prideful to begin with? What is it that you're truly prideful about? And this is where you kind of go on this internal journey. And one could even equate it to the hero's journey. And Allison can speak to that. She just let a meet up on it. But the hero's journey, where you're essentially, looking internally, and you're saying to yourself, what is it that really is causing me to react to this situation? Why do I feel the need to fit in the first place? And once you start asking those deep questions, you really start to understand yourself. And then you start to say, oh, that's my ego. And then you can kind of start to separate what your ego is and what you and actually how you really feel, or what, from the situation. So it gets back to something like with Epictetus, essentially this idea that you've been harmed when you really haven't been. So I think that's when I think of the individuation process, and we kind of see this in the Bhagavad Gita, and we saw it the other night. And I admit I have a lot to go back and learn about the individuation process itself, but with the Bible, kind of stepping through the door of having faith, essentially in something other than yourself. And that the self is essentially, you have that ego that you're kind of conquering. Anyway.
Wonderful. The question on the table is, how do you pursue self-knowledge? How do you get to the core of your being? And what are the obstacles in doing that? Addie, Goran, and Jeff. Addie.
Yes, I would like to further discuss about the core, about individualism, and Joe and Sarah have discussed about the ego, but then there's more than that. The self doesn't have like one part of it. They're like three or maybe more than that. For example, like Freud stated that a person has three parts: the ego, and the superego. And the book, there's like something called transactional analysis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one. Have you heard about transactional analysis, where the author wrote about a person's self has like three parts as well: the child, the parent, and the adult. So it's kind of correlate with what Freud stated in his ego and superego. But those three parts, a person is composed of those three parts, and and to some degree, it can create a personality type, and it's like MBTI, where you have like more like it's about 16 or something. I don't remember how many personality types, but a person has these 3 self in them. Sometimes they would have more of this, and sometimes they would have more of that. But that's another other. I mean, like I think it's the same other, but then he wrote about transactional analysis. I'm gonna type that up. I'm gonna like post it on there. And it was very interesting, because if you are interested in the MBTI, you'll find that very interesting, because there's some degree, like that graph, like how much your child is, how much your adult is, how much your parent is. One correct the other. The child part is like mischievous part, and then your super ego part is like
Thank
the
you.
conscious part, you know.
Thank
I
you.
can go on and on about this.
Yes, thank you. Next up is Goran. Goran, how do you pursue self-knowledge? What is involved in doing that?
Well, I've been doing that for a long time.
Mhm.
So if I'm to distill that in a few sentences, the first thing is intention. First thing is having motivation, intention. Because what Jung says, one quotes, I don't know much about Jung, but he said, one doesn't get enlightened by imagining figures of light. One gets enlightened by making unconscious conscious. The latter, being uncomfortable, is not popular. So we need motivation and intention to actually go into that uncomfortable, making unconscious conscious. Now, we need tools. How do we make unconscious conscious? Not just by wishing it. So thinking is, of course, one of the first tools that people use, because we are kind of trained in Western culture to use our thinking, but that's definitely not the most powerful tool in my experience. So then there's introspection, and that introspection can be fine-tuned. Particularly, I find mindfulness being very powerful. So very careful, trained introspection allows me to see things that I was not conscious before. Now, part of wisdom about that is self-acceptance. Self-awareness without self-acceptance is torture. That's what makes it uncomfortable. So, so I need self-awareness, introspection, mindfulness, and wisdom of self-acceptance to allow me to see without being overly overwhelmed or scared or something. So to me, that's most powerful way. Self-acceptance with self-awareness, mindfulness, meditation. I do use thinking, you know, I like to have my plan, but the true self-knowledge, I believe, cannot go far only by thinking, which is often a mistake some people make.
Wonderful.
That's my experience.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. Next up is Jeff. Jeff, how do we pursue self-knowledge?
Such a great question, Shrikant. And some of you know that my wife is a psychotherapist, and that I spend a great deal of time coaching people who are in leadership positions, who often have sort of backed themselves into a corner with regard to how they think about some difficult situations. And so while this is a wonderfully complex subject, I'll offer one approach, one angle to it. And that is that a remarkable amount of difficulty that we experience in how we think about situations is us bringing a story that we have told ourselves about something that's happened in the past, and certainly about something that's happening in the present, and quite possibly about something that we think is likely to happen in the future. These stories we tell ourselves, part of what Brian McVeigh calls mental interiority, are very compelling to us. And sometimes we're aware of them as stories, and sometimes we're not. But the invitation to tell those stories and notice what we paid attention to, and then especially this, what we chose to learn from those experiences. We can choose to learn whatever we want from our experiences. We can write the morals to these stories. And becoming a little bit more insightful and considering different options about what the morals to our stories might be can change your life. And whether that you can gain that a little bit by externalizing it, by writing your story out so that you can see it outside of your head and see what shows up. Sometimes sharing it with somebody else who will really listen and might even idea storm with you different morals that could be gained from that story that might serve you better, might help you feel more resilient, might help you feel more secure, might help you feel more loving, might allow you to forgive yourself, might allow you to forgive somebody else. Just changing the story a little bit, changing the moral that you choose to learn from it is a huge path both to self-awareness and to possibly gaining from it. There's just one line that somebody said to me once, sometimes it takes two minds to change one. And that the process of externalizing your story with somebody else and reshaping what the moral might be, even reshaping the story in the spirit of the book, It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood, is one way of exploring greater self-awareness and then actually using it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Next up is Judy, Joe, and Allison. Judy, how do you think?
How do you pursue self? That's $1 million question. Everybody has said so much, and so it's all the above. And Jung also says that it's not just either or, but it's and also. So everybody that has said something is and also this, and also that, and also that. So it's just putting it all together. I find it very convenient to use certain tools that are available in Jungian application of his theories, because it's not just knowing the theories, it's the application of it. So there's two that I really prefer to use a lot, and I do it a lot, just not just with myself, but with groups and seminars and with other people. And there's the Myers-Briggs. I'm sure that everybody's heard of it, and really understanding it and getting into it and doing it for another person, not just for yourself, but doing it in teams, doing it for your boss, and your boss does it for you or whoever you work for, or your friends or your spouse. So it's an interactive tool that you can use very effectively to understand yourself and others and your interrelationship with yourself and your own selves, because we have many selves inside of us. And the other one is what Jung called active imagination, which is writing dialogues. Well, I find that very useful, and many people do too, of course, that, and Jung wrote a lot about active imagination, especially in his Red Book, which was his last book that was hidden for, I don't know, 40, 50 years. And it finally came out some 10 years ago or so. And people were like, what? Is this the same Jung that we've always known? And so he became very popular, even more so with his Red Book, because of his dialogues, his active imagination. So if you can practice that and you can do it with others also, it's very effective. So those two tools that I wanted to talk about.
Wonderful. This is just amazing. Lots of really, really fascinating observations. Next up is Joe, followed by Allison. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, these have been really fantastic observations. I mean, everybody, especially on this particular question. So I'm just going to add something really briefly that I think is useful as well, is having a good friend is a really important part of actually self-knowledge, because the reason and I say a good friend is that they know what your shortcomings are. And we've talked about this. How do you complement yourself? You surround yourself with people that are strong in the areas where you're weak. And but there's something even deeper there as well, is if you have a good friend that's going to provide you with feedback, that really wants you to be your best self, that's invaluable. because then you're getting the feedback that you need, and you're getting honest feedback, and you have someone who actually cares about you for who you are and likes you in spite of your faults. And that's what I always felt like it was, you know, that one of the advantages of finding somebody that maybe if you either a friend or even a spouse or whomever that would provide you that feedback, that they care about you for who you are, and then you can honestly look inward. You can take an honest look inward and start to say, all right, where do I need to improve? Because I'm hearing it not just from myself, but I'm also hearing it from someone else.
Wonderful. Joe, I'm going to request you to find some videos that we have done of Jung, in particular, 2 videos, one on individuation and one by Richard Owen on psychological functions. Both of them are just incredible videos. So next up is going to be Allison. Allison, go ahead.
These were all so good, and they said so much of what I was going to say. So I was going to say the one is therapy, definitely. Another way is writing, which Jeff mentioned. Also spending time alone, because I think when you spend time alone without anybody around you, you have to face yourself, and you have to talk to yourself, and talking to yourself is helpful. And then Joe wanted me to talk about the hero's journey. So I think that with the idea of the hero's journey is that when you're taking on some kind of a quest, some sort of a challenge, in the course of pursuing that challenge, you learn about yourself with what you're good at, what you're not good at. But I think the thread through all of these is vulnerability. In order to really become self-aware, you have to be willing to make yourself vulnerable, which also ties to what Joe just said about a friend, is that to really have a good friendship, you have to make yourself vulnerable to them, and let them criticize you and praise you and everything, really.
Absolutely. So there is a lot of interest in Jung. So I want to spend some time on just Jung concept, because if you look at what Goran said, what Judy said, what Joe said, what you're saying, what Jeff said, there are lots of concepts of Jung involved there. And what I'm finding is that, especially after looking at the Red Book and looking at his development, he's really influenced by the Indian ideas of Atma and subconscious and things like that. So I'll say a few things here. So I'll start with Goran's observation about being aware of the edge. Because what happens is that, like most people, this is a concept from Gestalt psychology. Most people focus on the figure, but there is a ground, which is actually the foundation for everything. Similarly, our subconscious, our unconscious is very large. And it is sending you signals at the edge of your consciousness. And the question is, are you going to look at it, or are you not going to look at it? And as Alison was saying, that it is uncomfortable to look at it because it is something that is going to be unknown. And one of the principles that Jung has is that in filth, it will be found. So you have to be willing to face the challenge. You have to be willing to face the negative in order to go beyond that. So one part of it is being aware of the unconscious. And a lot of individuation is about making the unconscious conscious, letting it come in. The concept of, Jeff talked about stories. So the form in which Jung uses it is the concept of persona. So we have personas or you can talk about your thoughts shaping your life. You have a self-concept, which is your ego, which is your story, which is your persona that you show to other people and show to yourself as yourself. But it's not really you. you're just holding it up. And it's actually protecting things. It is limiting what the experience you have of life. This kind of channeling, you're saying only that. If it is not that, I'm going to just ignore it, something like that. So dealing with those things is a very big thing. The point that Joe was making about a good friend is very big, because what happens is, and this is an idea of Carl Rogers of authentic relating. You know, when you are actually trying to see the other person and the other person is trying to see you, it is a lot easier to notice things about yourself, because we have all kinds of confirmation biases where we do not look at some things. But when you are actually interacting openly with another human being, and there is that level of trust and goodwill, which is the foundation of that interaction, it allows you to see things far more easily than you could see by yourself. In terms of the cognitive functions, you know, the basis of MBTI is Jung's concept of cognitive functions. And there is a great video by Richard Owens on the 8 functions, where what he has done is that there is a guy called John Beebe, who was here like 3 times on our podcast. He's really brilliant, because what he has done is that he's taken 2 of the large ideas of Carl Jung and combined them together. One is the idea of psychological functions, and second is the idea of archetypes. And he has connected those, you know, in the system. So he has this 8 function model. And his student, Richard Owen, presented that, and John Beebe was there to answer questions. So it was amazing. You know, it's one of the most popular videos that we have on our YouTube channel. So I recommend that very highly. Just as an aside, that was actually very interesting. When I got interested in psychological functions, I ran meetups here in New York, and I would get like 80 different people. And I would do all kinds of experiments of saying, okay, people with same functions together, people with opposite functions together, people with thinking and feeling, you know, and describing what the interactions are like. That's a really interesting way of getting to know yourself, getting to know the other people. And it's a very powerful way of learning that people are different in their operation, and which actually reduces just the same point that Alison was making about, you know, kind of letting go. If you understand what is going on with another person, it is easier to let it go. You can say, oh, that's where they're coming from. That's how they're thinking. That's how their mind is working. It's not how my mind works, but that's how their mind is working. That reduces the level of anger that you have. It gives you a basis of actually saying, okay, if I say it this way, I'll be able to reach them because it is in their language. So those are some of the observations I had on Carl Jung. We have more than 30 to 40 videos. So please look up the Carl Jung playlist. And what we did was that we did this entire series on core ideas of Carl Jung. So I worked with people who are expert in Carl Jung to come up with these 8 core ideas. And we had like 3-hour sessions where 5 different cognitive Jungian psychoanalysts would talk about their take on how they use these ideas in their thought, in their practice. So they're really, really something remarkable. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. It's about 10:38. So the next question is really the tough question, and that is the question of meaningful life. You know what? But what we should do is that in the honor of Valentine's Day, let's do the question of letting love find you. So let's go with that question first. So what do you have to say about that? So letting love find you instead of looking for love. How do you approach? Any thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to speak. Goran.
Well, I'm going to be slightly cynical here because I don't have a Valentine today. So, so letting life find you. You know, there's one sentence I heard a long time ago. I thought it has wisdom in it. It goes like this. If somebody hates you, don't worry about it. It's not about you. I said, okay, that makes sense. They're running their own story, their own filter interpretation, and, you know, projecting stuff on me. But then a few years later, I found the second part of that. It says, if somebody loves you, don't worry about it. It's not about you. Oops. That sounds true too. It's a little more difficult to accept, but that's actually true. When I talk about it deeper, think about it deeper. So, what I see, you know, if somebody falls in love with me, right? It's kind of like a cute little kitten, you know, it's cute, but it's not really real, you know? So I said, you know, I'm grateful for somebody in love with me, but I know that they don't really know me and it's not really about me, right? So that's like love finding me, you know, somebody seeing me and then projecting their whatever desire for ideal partner and the image of their parents and whatever onto me. Now, there is probably a chance, if we happen to feel like that about each other and spend substantial time together as a couple, to develop more, how do I say, more real love or something like that. But what people normally call love, this Valentine card love and falling in love, that's a beautiful illusion, but it is illusion, kind of like a rainbow or something, you know? Nothing wrong with rainbows, but it's not like the real thing. Something to be enjoyed with awareness that it's not fully real, you know? So that's kind of my little bit of a sour grapes attitude at this Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Goran. Next up is Sarah, Joe, and Steve. Sarah.
Well, I guess from my experience, I think in some ways I kind of agree with Goran, in other ways I don't. So you know this saying, like you have to buy a lottery ticket to win the lotto, or if like you want to win the lotto, you got to buy a lottery ticket. I do think that love requires some action, like an initial thing, like you have to have a vulnerability, take a chance in order to receive like the full complexity of love. Because right, in the beginning, we have so many assumptions and imaginings that we could only love based on how we imagine something could be, because there hasn't been the physical time to experience all the depths of or complexity of love. But I think in terms of love finding you instead of looking for it, my experience is that no, like you can, you know, see things out in the world you love, or a song can come on the radio you like, or you can see acts of love in the world and feel love, or even kindness to you and feel love. But I think to kind of get to Goran's point of like, I think that love is like is like a give and take actions, like a choice between a choice agreement between two people or two things or a relationship. And I think that that yes, that you, I don't think that love can find you necessarily, but I think that if you want to receive love, then yeah, I think you got to buy a lottery, you got to buy a ticket to play the lotto and at least try something like that.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Joe, followed by Steve. Joe.
So I'm going to start playing the lottery. That's no, I think that that you can't necessarily go looking for it per se. But I think that there is a part that you play in this process. And that is the process that we've kind of talked about a little bit already, but the process of self-acceptance. And you have to be able to accept yourself in order to accept someone else's love. So that is part of this, is that you have to do the internal work that allows you then to go outward. The second part is that I feel like love evolves organically from friendships. I think if you're seeking it, that you may not necessarily, you may go looking in the wrong places. Primarily because you'll be following your desires. You know, that there's a possibility that fear will be pushing you in one direction versus actually letting things happen the way they should happen. And that doesn't mean you don't put yourself out there. But if you're thinking, if you go into a room thinking, I'm going to go find the one, and I have to find them in this room, and if I don't, then what's going to happen? Then I have to go out tomorrow night and find the one again. It becomes something where you're acting irrationally. So I think the thing is that to really accept yourself, become the best friend you could possibly be to someone else, and love evolves from that. And that's
Wonderful. Steve, you started it, so I'll give you the last word, and then we will go to the question of meaningful life. Steve.
Okay. I'm going to quote D.H. Lawrence, give him the final word. Those that go searching for love only make manifest their own lovelessness. The loveless never find love. Only the loving find love, and they never have to seek it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next question is about meaningful life. What is a meaningful life? And how do you get that? How do you arrive at that? What is meaning? And what is a meaningful life? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share. Okay, let's start with Joe.
This is a really deep and difficult question to answer to make it succinct. But I can think of, I have a friend that who just so happened to be, you know, they ended up having external success, but they came from very little. And that he told a story one time, and he said, you know, when they went out to eat, it was just he and his mother that were growing up together. And that when they went out to eat together, that they had so little that, you know, she would allow him to order whatever he wanted on the menu, but whatever was left over, that's what she used for her food. She had a very specific budget. And that it was a virtuous, kind, and something, a meaningful act to do for her son. And not only did, I'm sure, she at the end of her life probably look back and take great pleasure in the success that her son had, but also the joy that they had together, that it changed his life, that he's still telling the story today. That's a long way of saying, and that just putting it in a story format, is that virtue is something that's real. That when you get to the end of your life, it's these interactions that you have that really are meaningful. That's what you leave behind. It's not all the other stuff that you think it's not things per se. It's the actions and the times that you take with others. And then you start to see that's where the cardinal virtues really do matter. Virtue is real. You recognize in those moments why you pursue certain virtues, you know, whether it be, you know, justice or charity or whatever it may be. But the cardinal virtues in particular for a lot of reasons. But nonetheless, that's the reason I think is how do you find purpose in life? That's my personal journey. But that's one example. You can give a whole host of examples as to why it's more meaningful to pursue virtue than to pursue objects.
Wonderful. So Goran, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Darn. Okay, I'll give you my first one. First answer to the question when I was like 21, and then current one. When I was 21, I said, okay, so what's the purpose of life or meaning? I was like, darn, I don't know. But then wisdom kicks in. Why do I want to know answer to that question? Well, I want to know answer to the question so I will know direction in my life. So I know which way to go, to fulfill my life, whatever. Well, do I really need to know the goal, the destination? Not necessarily. All I need to know is my next step. If I can just know my next step, I'm good for now, and then I'll think about it later, right? So, okay, so what would be a good next step for my purpose of my life? Well, pondering the question, what the purpose of my life is. That sounds like a good next step. So I figured pondering the question, what's the purpose of my life, is the purpose of my life for all practical purposes for right now. So I was happy that. Mm-hmm. And then later now, 40 years forward, I have a couple of sentences. One of them is, to live life truly worth living. Test for that is at deathbed. If I look back at my life and I say, I lived and I loved, it was a great life, and I can go in peace. That's life was truly worth living. If at my deathbed I said, oh shoot, I missed this, I didn't do that, blah, 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 that was not a good life. And then there is a quote that I came up with, like advice for people like me, how to live a life truly worth living goes kind of like this. Live courageously from your heart, be present to this moment, and allow life to surprise you. Live courageously from your heart, be present to this moment, and allow life to surprise you. That's kind of my personal formula that I try to stick to.
Beautiful, beautiful. We did a series on Louis Sullivan, and the way he described, as a child, he says that life began to break in upon me, and a continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape his destiny. So it's like both sides have to be, you have to be open to kind of take things in, and then you have to say, you have to have the courage to say and going back and forth. DLJ, what about you? How do you think of meaning of life?
Yeah, so this is cool because this gives me an excuse to chip in with the bit that I had prepped before I realized it was about self-improvement. So it's not entirely, but yeah, I'll do the short version. What I'd prepped, anyway, I actually had 3 books. So Purpose of Life, I discovered from reading Darwin. So that's a kind of different definition of life. That's not personal life, right? Life in general. Origin of a species, right? Meaning of life. Well, obviously we have the answer of 42 from Douglas Adams. And of course, the key part of that is that the question is, what is 6 times 9? Which tells you a lot about the meaning of life, right? Similarly, George R.R. Martin would tell us that what he likes to write about is the human heart in conflict with itself. So the line I'm going to take for meaning of life is actually, I'm going to pick June, although I know Americans say Dune. I'll try and say that. And in fact, I misremembered this. I reread it or re-audio booked it a while ago. And I actually realized that I misremembered it from my teens, but I'll give you the misremembered version. The meaning of life is the experience of living with all its conflicts and challenges, right? And then the third part is, and last part, the value of life. So for that is a different book, probably the greatest resurrection story ever told. Near the end, the hero and the protagonist are together. And Sam is very upset that Frodo is leaving. And Frodo says, key part, the whole part of the book really is what this line, he says, we set out to save the Shire and it was saved, but not for me. So the value of life is the legacy we leave behind. So there you go. So purpose of life, continuity from Darwin. Meaning of life is the experience of living. And the value of life is the legacy we leave behind.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, DLJ. Next up is Addie. Addie, what is the meaning of life to you?
Yeah, so I'm still young and I haven't figured out a lot of stuff yet. So I don't really know what is like a meaningful life for me. But
Okay.
I have seen the example, but I can give you an example of what a meaningful life is from the perspective of a pigeon. And this is the reason why it's unique is because if you would like me to tell you this story, this pigeon, for some reason it has Caesar and it cannot fly. So it's like a pigeon that cannot fly. So somebody report this pigeon that they cannot fly, give it to the animal control wanted to put it down. So that is an animal, that was going to put down, but somebody with a big heart saved this pigeon and nurture this pigeon in her home. So even though this pigeon cannot fly, cannot do what it's supposed to do, but this pigeon has a purpose. This woman gave this pigeon a purpose. You know what this purpose? His purpose is. This pigeon's purpose is to look after the little puppies, because this woman, she's like a foster care family for animals. So she gave this little pigeon a purpose. Give its life a purpose to take care of the little puppy, to cuddle with them and nurture them and stuff like that. So that is the meaningful life for me.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Shara.
I'm still feeling so deeply that Frodo quote that I forgot what I was going to say. So pass on me. But I'm really thankful that quote was shared. It really hit home for me. Thank you.
Sounds good. Let's see here. What shall we say? Okay, let's end with the knowledge, about the quest of knowledge that Judy was talking about, the satisfaction you get from learning. What is the role of learning in your life? What does learning do for you? Why do you learn? Like almost everybody who comes here is interested in learning. This is a community of learners. Why learn? What does it do for you? Joe.
I think that the reason that we learn, that I learn, is that so it facilitates relationships with other people, ultimately. And I said this the other night during the Tao Te Ching meetup, is that the thing that's really, really beautiful about this community and anybody that's, a community of learners, is that you feel humbled, because there are a lot of really smart people that come here, people that are very capable. And what they're demonstrating is, and this is often, I found this the case in many cases, is that their gratitude for their abilities is that they're actually going out there and seeking knowledge. But not only do they seek it, but they share it with other people. So when you seek knowledge, the reason you seek knowledge is so that you can interact with others in a more meaningful way. It's so that when somebody maybe comes to you for a question, that you can provide them with an answer that it may be, that's a little bit more deeper, that makes them think. It really is a way of allowing people to feel better about themselves. Because you have this journey of self-knowledge, you start to gain empathy for others. So I think that that's really, for me, the real journey for knowledge is so that it facilitates the relationships and the relationships that we've already, created in this community. But it's very humbling as well. So it's to share.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Sarah, Judy, and Goran. Sarah, why do you learn?
Well, for me, I just want to say learning is one of the great loves of my life. I have a very, very, it is one of the most rewarding and meaningful things to me in my life. But there is a dark side to learning, and there is a very strong, like a very distinct thing for me that can shift it to something very bad. So learning isn't always for me just a positive thing, and that is, did I have choice? Things that I choose to learn are and want to learn and learn through through consenting to learn them are by far some of the most, like, the great loves of my life, learning concepts. But I think when things are forced to be learned, are forced upon, or are forced to behave, or forced in a way in order for someone else's beliefs, that type of learning against one's will, like lessons, I would say, maybe, like punishment, is the dark side of learning. So I just want to hold space for both.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is Judy.
I think that, again, that's another $1 million question that we'll never answer. But the fun is asking it. So the more we ask it, the better. And anybody who finds the answer that can be proven over and over again will probably win the Nobel Prize in Literature or something, or Peace Prize. For me, learning is gratitude. It's basic. I can't live without it. So I'm very grateful that I'm a learner. And I see a lot of people that are not motivated to learn. And well, I'm sorry, but I do. So, and I see this group, for example, is a great example of learners. And I'm very grateful to be part of this group.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. Marco, you have not spoken before, so please go ahead.
I just think learning is as, basic as like food and water, basically, like, like a plant needs whatever to grow, the basics to grow. We need, learning to grow.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marco. And I have to read out Allison's quote, Allison's message. I need to rest my voice, but I call the thirst for knowledge, feed the beast. The beast gets hungry and keeps needing to be fed knowledge. Wonderful. Next up is Goran.
I have kind of dual attitude towards learning. One, it's just fun, I like science, I read about rocket propulsion and the types of submarines and stuff like that. It's just fun. Another one is a little deeper, kind of spiritual. And there's a quote I like, goes like this: a man of knowledge gathers knowledge until he is hopelessly confused. A man of wisdom gets rid of garbage until little is left, but what's left is true. When I was studying psychology as a youngling, there was a class called Theories of Personality. I swear there were like 20 of them in that one book, okay? Talk about being confused at the age of 20 or so. 20 theories of personality, but that's necessary. And then distilling it, making my own understanding how humans work, right? So getting rid of garbage until little is left and that little is truth. So that's the path of wisdom. That's like, what is the purpose of life? I can read 15 philosophers about it, but then eventually you have to get rid of all of that, and just little is left, and that's true. And that's the part of learning, kind of quest for wisdom. The first one, quest for information and find facts, I do that too, but that's not like the core of me. That's just a hobby.
Wonderful. We talk about, in our study of, we're currently looking at these 3 great works, one from China, one from India, one from the West, Bhagavad Gita, Tao Te Ching, and the Gospel of John. And one of the concepts that comes from it is the center and periphery. So like the core of you and the periphery. And actually all these three works, when they talk about knowledge, they're talking about the knowledge of your core. So it is the wisdom part that they are looking at. They're looking at the core of you and the core of the universe. That's what they call knowledge. Like the modern people call knowledge about is knowledge of things, of the peripheral things. Whereas these traditions call knowledge the knowledge of the core that shapes everything. Next up is Mike.
Yeah, I kind of like what Judy said about it being the $1 million question. We could probably do several meetups just on this one question. But so for me, very practically, learning requires effort. And there's a big payoff at the other end of that when you put time in. And if you're confused about something and you come back again and you just, especially things you learn to do physically, it's not just our intellect that we're building, but even things that are tactile, it takes effort. And I think that's how you build your well of perseverance and resilience and all those things. It's not for free. I think it requires effort. Learning is a great shot for that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So let me tell you about this series on self-improvement and the way I want to do it. I want to do it in a very different way than we have done the meetups before. Instead of one person presenting their ideas on self-improvement, I want it to be a meetup like this, where people can bring in their ideas. We'll probably do it in larger chunks. So we'll have maybe like 4 presentations or something like that per meetup. I'm still trying to work out the right format. We'll have to do some experimentation. But what I want is that we have an amazing community of learners. And all of us are learning all the time. And I want to leverage all of it. I don't want it to be just one person presenting the ideas and others absorbing it and reacting to it. I want multiple people presenting their ideas. I want people to get used to presenting the ideas. Actually, it's amazing. Everybody who has done presentations here will find, and I see Mike nodding. It actually makes your understanding of the ideas you thought you understood much better, because in the course, it does 2 things. One is in the process of saying, okay, I'm going to now present it to other people, you have to make it objective for other people. And it has to become clear to them. That itself is great. You'll learn a lot just doing that. And secondly, people are going to tell you what they think. And that's going to be something else. People are going to come at the same topic that you're familiar with from all kinds of angles. So I want to encourage everybody to do presentations. It could be very short presentations. Doesn't matter. But I will still figure out, I still have to figure out how to come up with a format. So we're going to start off next Thursday, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, with a presentation by John. John used to run the Self-Improvement Fridays. For almost a year, he ran that, and he's just magnificent. What he does is he takes a concept and he takes a work. He takes like a short story and a concept, or a book and a concept, and he talks about the concept and shows it how it works in the book. You don't have to be familiar with the book, but it allows him to go kind of at an abstract level and at a concrete level. And he has done that for many things. So I don't know what exactly he's going to do. He was going to let me know by Wednesday, and then I will announce it. So I'm going to start off with that, but it's not going to be just one person. It could be, it's going to be multiple people. So if you want to present, again, it has to be focused on learning, on self-improvement, things like that, which all of us are interested in. So please contact me. Please send me a message through Meetup if you would like to talk about anything. And I encourage you to do that. And I will figure out a way so that you can present, even if you're not presented before. And I'm just telling you, like, for example, Yogeshwar, who is a key part of our Gita meetups, he said, oh, I had not presented before. And he gave such an incredible presentation on such a deep topic, just off the bat, of this relationship between the yoga of knowledge, yoga of action, and yoga of love. Connection between knowledge, mission or action or work, and love. How do they all kind of dovetail with each other, and what are the connections between them? And what's the nature of somebody who is focused on one with others as being supporting? What's the difference in them, in all these three? It's just incredible. So you will surprise yourself by seeing what is possible to you. So I want to encourage you to message me, and I'll come up with multiple formats. Like, for example, here we just did it impromptu. You came in, you had something in mind, you spoke for 2 to 5 minutes. We will do some of that. We'll do some places where people can spend, making maybe 20-minute presentation on a book. And we will have like maybe 3 such presentations. We will also make breakout rooms standard in that meetup. So we get to discuss things in small groups. All right. So I'm really looking forward to this new series. This was one of the most popular series that we had in 52 Living Ideas. So I'm delighted that we are going back with it. All right. Who remembers who was I think Joe, Joe, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm here.
Yeah. So do you want to say anything about the self-improvement series? Anything that you remember about self-improvement series? Or any thoughts about, or forget about the past series of what because I've talked to you a little bit about what we are planning to do. What do you think so far? This basic idea.
I really like this format a lot. I mean, again, John was fantastic in the past. He really was, and he did such a fantastic job. But I think that this is a way of distributing and kind of taking, distributing the work and taking a little bit from everyone, and then we can kind of put these ideas and make these connections together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's going to be interesting to see how closely related some of these works are, what we're getting from them. That our ideas about self-improvement at their core, what does it really encompass? So I think like some of the things that were brought up tonight with Judy, in particular, with this, the idea of Jung, and then just some of the more philosophical works that we're talking about, we'll really start to see some connections between the philosophy and some of the practical psychology that I think is going to be pretty exciting, as opposed to putting it all on one individual who did a magnificent job every week in and week out.
But no, I really like that. Now, what I think we'll find is that we'll end up getting the same effect that we are getting by studying the Bible, Tao Te Ching, and the Gita. Notice that, as we have gotten deeper into it, we are able to see patterns of what is common to it and what is different, and what are the different strengths and what is the commonality. What I would expect is that as we study, as we have many books on self-improvement on the table, we will start to see kind of themes, like common themes, kind of the shape of the self-improvement ideas that everybody brings together. So I'm really looking forward to that. It will take some time to develop, but I think it will be something really remarkable. Mike A., what do you think about this idea of self-improvement meetups?
I like it a lot and highly recommend your first comments about people doing presentations. It has been invaluable for me. You give me several opportunities the past 6 months to present, and just spending time thinking about ideas before you present them is it's a great way to learn, especially when you realize it's not your words, it's actually people's reactions to your words that really spread the conversation. So I love I think it's great.
Excellent. Goran, you have been interested in self-improvement. What do you think about this idea about doing meetups on self-improvement?
I love the idea. I'm in.
Excellent, excellent. Wonderful. All right, let's see. So it looks like everybody is quite excited. So we will, I will launch it. We'll work with the format. Be a little bit patient, because I tend to be very ambitious about how much we can try to do. And we go back and forth in terms of, the size of the presentations and the number of presentations, the amount of interaction in the breakout rooms versus questions at the end. So we'll play around with all of those things to come up with something that really works. All right. So so thank you very much, everybody. Always amazing to see all these amazing people coming here. And good night, everybody. Bye.
Right.
Bye.